My name is Karen Brzezinski, and with me today I have Dr. Paul Epstein, a naturopathic doctor in Connecticut. And today we are going to talk about trauma and resilience and how trauma affects the body and how to recover from trauma. And specifically, we're making this for those who were affected by the wildfires in California. But if this video makes it to another person or group of people who have gone through something traumatic, then I hope that this is helpful for them as well. So my name is Karen Brzezinski. I am a trauma thriver. In 2008, I was hit and run over by a car and experienced a tremendous amount of PTSD from that, as well as chronic pain. That's how ultimately I got here, and that's how I actually know Dr. Epstein through my current day job, which is at the California Naturopathic Doctors Association. That's how we met. And I've been through the gamut in terms of my own healing journey and figuring it all out and moving through all the stuff and then coming through and out the other side. And so I'm really happy to be here sharing this information with you guys. And I would love to hand it over to Dr. Epstein so he can share a little bit about his background and how he can help with trauma and his experience in that area. So Dr. Epstein, take it away.
Well, hi, Karen. Thank you for inviting me, and hi, whoever's listening or watching. I think we are connecting because of the reality of the stress and trauma that people in California have been going through with the wildfires. And my background in terms of as a naturopathic doctor is to specialize in stress-related disease. So this is a preventive opportunity that how we handle the stresses and traumas we go through as or while or immediately after we go through them can go a long way to preventing problems and issues later on of the mind, body, heart, and spirit. So the way to look at trauma is just a severe stress of any sort. And obviously the terror of your home burning down and worse, losing loved ones is quite traumatic for people. And everybody responds differently. So a key concept is it's what's happening and what we do about it, but also how we choose to relate to it. What resources can we bring to face and deal with the stress and trauma that we're going through? And again, just to give a little bit of background, I'm also a mindfulness meditation teacher, and I practice a form of psychotherapy called internal family systems therapy. And part of that is to work with parts of us that carry the pain and wounds of traumas. Now, quite often, we are not always aware of what's happening and what's going on and the effects of the trauma while it's occurring, whether it's an accident or a fire or childhood abuse or sexual abuse or abandonment or neglect, whether from childhood or a terrible marriage and divorce or domestic violence. I mean, there are a whole host of traumas and adverse events that we live through throughout our life. The challenge is, how do we face them? How do we process them? And how do we heal them? Whether they happened in childhood and we've carried them as a burden for a long time, or whether they're happening now in our life because we've gone through the terrible fires in California, in our homes, in our communities, and our friends and loved ones are struggling and suffering as well. So there's also that sense that we're all in it together. So we can cultivate this quality of resilience, which is the ability to bounce back, ability to kind of take the hit. Not to age myself or date myself too much, but I think it was the 50s or 60s on TV. There was a commercial by Timex watches where they would drop the watch out of a plane and it would land on the floor. And what could they do to this watch? And the phrase was, "It takes a licking and keeps on ticking." And what I have seen in my career, whatever the symptom or disease is, chronic disease or headache or stomach ache or irritable bowel, these were some of the things we've spoken about at webinars on the California Association organizations' programs and continuing ed, the source and the core of what contributes to some of these chronic ailments is often the stress that a person suffers in their life. Those are called ACEs, adverse childhood events from childhood. We also have a scale called a Holmes scale, which has been around a long time, which is kind of a predictor of stress or illness or symptoms later in life as a result of traumas and stresses that you might have gone through throughout your lifespan. So you'll always ask the person a question: when your symptoms started, when you got diagnosed with that disease, what was happening in your life at the time or a year or two preceding? Quite often, the onset of that is stimulated in terms of the straw that breaks the camel's back. It can be a direct cause over time contributing factor as an etiology for disease, among others, be it lifestyle, genetics, environment, and the whole host of other factors that one must address for any kind of ailment disease. What's the cause? But quite frankly, these stresses and traumas that we live through and mostly survive, but to what degree do they stay with us, and do we carry them as burdens or pockets of the pain in the mind and body and heart?
So what you're saying,
Yeah.
Dr. Epstein, if I'm hearing you correctly, is when we go through something traumatic, that's when something in our bodies can react to that, and that's when physical symptoms can actually start
Or begin, or be seated.
Right. So like going through these fires, if this trauma is left unchecked inside a person's system,
right,
symptoms can develop over time that they may not directly relate back to this particular thing happening. And it's the same thing with adverse childhood events and any other stresses or traumas that a person may have gone through in their life.
Well, it's a combination of factors.
Yeah.
Some are the initiating cause, some of the seeding, some of the actual, this is what happened, and this is the pain and symptoms that come from it. Okay. But these are things that evolve over time because we've been given a wonderful system of survival, fight, flight, freeze. You know, how this evolved in us physiologically, biochemically, is in order to, early man had to run away from the tigers and the lions and had to fight for food and find our way to survive as we grew and as we aged as a species. And initially, that was to help us run and help us to deal with it and to wake us up and to get our energy flowing to be able to fight or run, or, you know, the deer in headlights is a trauma response to stop and freeze to stay safe so they won't see me moving. It's the energy of it. So when we go through a trauma, our body is reacting consciously. We practice now meditation and yoga and relaxation as a way to relax and hopefully release some of that stress and tension. We do psychotherapy to try to heal some of the pain and wounds from the past that we carry. And a contributing factor is the degree to which the trauma, which changes the brain and changes the body, is still living. This is the context of PTSD, that the trauma wasn't released. It was held onto in a pocket of pain, not because the person's weak or stupid or doesn't have courage. It's because they didn't know that their body mind is holding it and carrying it. It only comes out later when you ask those questions.
Know, like what are some of the things that they can look for or try to identify within themselves to see if they do have unresolved trauma living inside of them?
Well, again, I don't know that I want to call everything unresolved, because if you're going through it at the time, it's something that you go through. So, you know, we all have different traumas. So, for example, I share mine, you shared some of yours. So, I do this work because my father was a soldier in World War II. And we know soldiers suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. That's actually how we began to understand. It was once called shell shock, because soldiers came home from war and they got nervous and they were anxiety and they had flashbacks and they had nightmares, and all of these are things that I experienced from my dad. And people suffered.
Even though you didn't go through that.
Even though I didn't go through it, I experienced.
This is called. You experienced it through him.
This is called psychosocial epigenetics, where we actually inherit the trauma from our ancestors, passed on through the psychosocial
Yeah.
evolution and direct contact. If I look in my dad's eyes and I see his terror of war, there's a part of me that gets touched by that and affects me.
So for
And so,
example, like if there were parents that, were in the home when it burned down, but their kid was somewhere else, that kid can actually experience the trauma on some level that the parent
if
experienced.
the parents are still carrying that
Okay.
terror,
Yeah.
that fear,
Right.
that, oh my God, I'm going to die or
Yeah.
I'm going to burn to death, whatever that fear and trauma was,
Yeah.
at some point, gently, with support, one needs to kind of look inside and see and feel and sense what's there. Now, early on, it's still kind of very fragile and very delicate. So
Yeah.
we have to tread lightly. You don't want to ever want to re-traumatize, but you bring the resources of support and compassion and presence, acknowledging. Give you an example again. A big trauma for me, I mentioned my dad, is he went through that trauma. When I had a Center for Mind Body in Israel, I had a lot of people who were children of Holocaust survivors or Holocaust survivors themselves. Now they had recovered and they're living their lives, but what part of them might still carry some of that trauma?
Mhm.
And it's unresolved, not because they're bad or weak, because they may not know it's there, but the research is now showing that the predictor and contributing factors to disease later in life is early life trauma or the stresses that we go through.
Mhm.
We know the effect of stress on health and disease for heart disease and cancer and diabetes, contributing factors, sometimes an etiology that has to be integrated with everything else. It's not a magic cure all or be all. And we don't necessarily want to label ourselves, but these traumas can build and the stresses can go. So another trauma that by itself may not be a big deal becomes a straw that breaks the camel's back, and that symptom starts or that disease begins for which you have a genetic predisposition,
Mhm.
etc. So we you know
Because that trauma leaves you so vulnerable.
yes, and but our survival strategy at first is to avoid it, is to suppress it, is
Yeah. Yeah.
I
I
don't
can.
have to. I don't want to feel it. It's
That's what
scary.
I
It's
did for
painful.
a long
It
time.
hurts. Yeah, leave me alone.
Yeah.
I don't want to go there.
Yeah. And it's
And
not
it's
socially acceptable either to let it all come up and feel it.
yeah, and we don't know how.
Right.
And why you and I are speaking, because I'm teaching knowing that a lot of disease, part of the factors contributing are the stresses that the patient has gone through. So there's stress management, how to manage your stress now, but then there's the actual facing and healing of the deeper traumas that you might still carry. Some of the books, the titles, The Body Bears the Burden,
Mm-hmm.
Scared Sick, The Body Keeps the Score. Where does that terror fear goes? It goes into our high blood pressure. It goes to weaken our immune system, and we may get sicker. It
And
goes to
then,
chronic pain, and
yeah.
and we need treating it and diagnosing it conventionally, naturopathically, holistically. But the mind body is important to integrate, and quite often people, even though psychological trauma, obviously we go to therapists and counselors and psychologists, but sometimes when it ends up in the body, we tend not to see the therapist, thinking my migraine headache or my irritable bowel, or and we need treating of that clinically on a
Right.
physiological level as well. We don't always know that that's connected. So you ask, how would one know? If you start noticing you're starting to get new symptoms that you haven't had before
Mm.
in your body, in your mind, you know, headaches, stomach aches, you're not
Mhm.
sleeping properly, you notice you're
Mhm.
getting a little more anxious, maybe
Mhm.
these are beginning signs that the trauma, because it's natural to have, there's post-traumatic stress and there's post-traumatic stress disorder. And I don't really think it's a disorder either. It's just a body doing the best it can to
Mhm.
process things that are too difficult. Because as I shared, the goal is, imagine if at the end of every day you did some yoga and meditation and got a massage and you relaxed and you did some healing energy and you just said, whatever stress I had today, I let it go. So I start tomorrow fresh and clean with no stress, no trauma, no fear, no worries, no nothing. We didn't do that. We move through life and we carry whatever we got,
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah. And
happens to
then
us.
the traditional medical system will have us medicate over the symptom rather than trying to heal the root
Right.
cause so
Well, the
much.
critical medical system is important too, because we
Yes.
don't want the disease to progress. We want a
Right.
diagnosis. We want to know if it's a cancer or it's a heart disease. We want to treat
Right.
it also to
Absolutely.
stop the symptom and alleviate the pain.
Hmm.
So, the more we recognize that our system and each person needs a whole person approach
Hmm.
and an integrated approach
Hmm.
of conventional and natural and functional and psychological, that we're treating the whole person and we're working together, then every component that's being integrated will have their role in a larger whole. And so as we get more integrative, the conventional doctor, as we talk about it, becomes even more important, because it's not the only thing,
Hmm.
but it's an important thing.
Hmm.
When it's the only thing, then we can go, well, they didn't look at this and they didn't do the stress and they didn't do the diet and they just did the diagnosis. Well, let them do what they're expert at, because that's important.
Hmm.
So it's not like knocking what they're not doing,
Right.
it's appreciating what they are doing,
And then
and,
integrating it with
and integrate with what we as
well.
naturopathic doctors can do. Because I know how to order tests and diagnose, but my patient has chest pain. I know how to listen to their heart and order an EKG and see the cardiologist. And then I will help you with your diet and your stresses and your lifestyle, and I may look deeper as a mind-body person at some of the core issues and engage you to heal, let go of some of your trauma. So I think we need all of that, but the main person we need is the person, is to engage in not avoiding but facing, but
Hmm.
gently with support.
Hmm.
So there are some ingredients to cultivating resilience. This is
Yeah.
becoming what we might call, in education. Jim's going to use a model in education, because it's not just what's happening as I'm speaking to you. There are many people who've had terrible accidents,
Hmm.
and you struggled at first from that pain and that difficulty. And no judgment. Eventually, you had to face some of the difficulties for it, the reality of it, the pain of it, the hurt of it, the anger of it, the frustration of it, the sadness of it, the fear of it. I mean, a whole host of
And I
difficult,
didn't,
difficult experiences,
yeah, and
not
I
to
didn't,
mention what was happening in your body.
right. And I had no awareness around any of that. And I did not even know that I was traumatized till like
Right.
2 years later, when I was talking to a therapist
Exactly.
about an unrelated issue. And I was telling her all my symptoms. And she's like, wow, you really had some pretty intense post-traumatic
Yes.
stress. And I was like,
Yes.
what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a
I
huge
mean,
light bulb moment for me.
and we can look at all of life as sort of a post-traumatic stress.
Yeah.
Like
We're all
when
healing from
when
something.
when they when they measure at first, when we understood that stress and the immune system go together, psychoneuroimmunology, right?
Right.
What they study are medical students after they take the boards, 4 years of school, which is a kill. Then you're studying for the boards to pass, so you can
Yeah.
practice and get a license. And then what is going to, you're going to get sick, because it's called post-trauma.
Yeah.
During the trauma, you're keeping it together. It's
Right. Yeah.
after you collapse. You're
It,
an elderly person, you're taking care of a spouse, they have a heart disease, they have a heart attack, they develop Alzheimer's, they develop Parkinson's.
mhm.
You've taken care of them for 10 years and then they pass away, and somehow you've kept it together. As soon as they pass away, your
Mhm.
whole body mind falls apart. And
Mm.
that's not a judgment. This is why we need to take care of ourselves. This is the concept of wellness
Yeah.
and healing, of nurturing, preventing these things. So our discussion is really for those who are listening, trying to find out and explore, what's happening? How was I affected by this?
Mhm.
So I always share if I'm teaching, if you watch this, and again, we're just trying to improve. I might get two patients diagnosed with the same illness, or told you just have cancer, right? With the same diagnosis and prognosis. One person says, I'm going to beat this. My glass is half full.
Mhm.
I'm going to use this as a challenge. I'm going to get stronger. I'm going to face my fear. So example with that is, a patient might come and say, Dr. Epstein, can you help me deal with my stress and my fear and my anxiety of a diagnosis of cancer? I want to get rid of it because it's not good. My doctor told me being afraid isn't good for my disease and it's not helpful for healing. And I say, agree with you, Mr. Jones, but I want to help you be with your fear, because when you have a diagnosis like that, being afraid is appropriate. So what's happening in your body and mind is not bad or wrong. It's the body's response. Sometimes it doesn't have the resources to face it and to deal with it, so it doesn't injure you in a disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the resources, as I shared, is first and foremost exploring your own attitude and getting support, which is not easy. My home just burned down, or I just lost a loved one,
Mm-hmm.
and there's grief,
Mm-hmm. And
terrible
that's,
grief.
yeah. And I think a lot of times we try to suppress that or
Yes,
push it down or not feel it or affirm over it and try too quickly to move to, it's going to be
exactly,
okay. I see the
exactly,
glass is half full, when it's
exactly.
really, we have to acknowledge what's going on first
Right,
and how deeply that grief is really
right,
affecting us, and how, how much we
exactly.
don't want to feel it, and then have developed the courage to actually go into that place and let ourselves feel that grief or that sadness or
Right.
that loss.
Yeah. So the glass half full is in response to a sense of positive that I can face this.
Yeah.
I can, I'm not going to bury this, and I'm not going to run from this. I'm going to choose to face this. And it's going to hurt.
Yeah. It's scary.
And
And
it's
it takes a
scary.
lot of courage, especially for
So,
those of us who, walk around with emotional armor.
and the reality is, and that's okay.
Yeah.
There's a line in recovery. People going through recovery, 12-step recovery from addiction, from pain, of alcoholism, or the pain of drug addiction,
Mm-hmm.
which we're seeing is rampant in our culture.
Mm-hmm.
It's recognizing only I can do my recovery and only I can face it, but I can't do it alone. So, one of the beginning elements of the exploration of trauma and how it might affect you, right, is to kind of have a sense and to know, like, what's your emotional awareness? What are you feeling? Because you first have to have awareness of what's happening. From there, you then choose the best way to respond.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so how did I get like this? What's happening here? Let me listen to the part of me that may be sad or scared or angry or hurt or afraid or numb, without forcing or pressure. This is what I'm sharing, and when I'm teaching uh, the integration of this in naturopathic medicine and whole person medicine,
Mm-hmm.
is to find out, look at the story of the self. What's happening?
Yeah.
What are you feeling? I'm really carrying the terror of, oh my God, where am I going to live?
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm carrying the grief of, thank God my family's okay, but we lost everything. And
Mm-hmm.
I have all the mementos from my childhood that I've lost.
Right.
And these are shocks and traumas that, you know, and it people have stresses, to begin with in life.
Yeah.
And you add this one onto it,
Right.
none of us are immune from the reality of our own life stresses to begin with. And then you throw this guy on top of it, this situation on top of it, it can be too much for people.
Yeah.
So it's to seek out help if you've just lost a loved one, which is considered the number one stressor. In the general, what are the stresses in a person's life? They lose a spouse for 50 years to an illness. Doesn't even have to be, not even be considered traumatic. It's just stressful, but it's traumatic if you've been with the same person for 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
So what am I feeling?
Yeah.
And how am I dealing with that feeling? And am I letting myself face that? And there are tools and support to go through that, which is, you see this in our culture when this horrible experience of nature, and then we have the horrible experience of somebody going into a synagogue and or a school and just shooting people
Yeah.
out of the blue. How do you deal with that? I live in Connecticut. Oh, the state is still dealing with Sandy.
Mm-hmm.
Was it like
Newtown.
20 years ago, however long ago
Yeah.
it was, a long time. Not 20, I think maybe 10 or 11 years ago. We had the hurricane. There was a Hurricane Sandy, but I meant Sandy Hook
Oh,
Elementary.
Sandy.
I
Yeah.
apologize.
Newtown.
The hurricane was a
Hurricane
was a
Sandy. That
trauma.
was my
I
neck of
meant
woods,
I
Jersey.
meant when the children were killed in elementary school. So I got my Sandy traumas meant Sandy Hook Elementary School,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. In Newtown.
The president goes, the country comes together. You're not alone. We're with you. Compassion. You don't have to suffer alone. So part of that is to recognize that you're not alone. You
Yeah.
feel alone because you're lost in your own world of pain and suffering and struggle. But you have to reach out and you have to seek support and you have to seek community and you have to ask for help, whether it's
You,
professional or neighbors or friends or family. And you have to be able to say, I'm having a hard time. This is really difficult.
yeah.
And what's difficult? I'm scared. I'm angry. I'm afraid. I'm in pain. I'm grieving. And sometimes the pain is so great that to survive it, you need to suppress it. So
Mm,
we don't want to, we're not taking a slab hammer and forcing it open.
mm-hmm,
We give people space. We
mm-hmm,
tread lightly. We create an environment. Another example from grief, from my personal life as a Jewish person. When someone dies, we do what's called sitting Shiva. Shiva is to sit, which means we just go and the person lost their loved one, and the ritual and the religion part of it and the cultural norm of it is to go and sit for 7 days and acknowledge you're in pain. And don't go back to your usual life. Don't try to get over it.
mm-hmm,
Sit. Talk about the person. Sit in the home. Feel your grief. Acknowledge that the loved one died. It's like a direct staring grief and suffering in the face
mm-hmm,
directly.
mm-hmm,
Not easy to do.
mm-mm.
But people come for 7 days. Your friends, your family, your relatives come and they join you
And they witness you.
and they witness you and they don't go, oh, don't feel that, or oh, well, they try to cheer you up in a sense that they can't cheer, but they try to let you know, I care. You're not alone,
Yeah.
right? This is
I,
part of being lumen. You lost your dad. I lost my dad 2 years ago,
yeah.
or whatever the grief is. And so you share in the universality of it. It doesn't take the pain away in that sense, but it helps us be less alone, that this is happening to me, or God did it to me and I'm a victim, as opposed to, unfortunately, this is part of life and it can and does happen to anyone. And now it happened to me.
Yeah.
And how do I face it? How do I learn from it? How do I take care of myself in the midst of it? How do I stay positive and optimistic? These are some of the qualities. How do I have a sense that, and this is a line from Viktor Frankl,
Mm-hmm,
from Man's Search for Meaning.
mm-hmm,
Now, everything I'm saying, I don't mean to make it sound so simple and formulaic and like ingredients in a
mm-hmm.
recipe, or because the map is not the territory. I'm giving you a map, but the territory is the pain, is the hurt, is the anguish, is the sadness, is the fear, is the need to survive, is the not wanting to go there, is what's happening to my body and where did this symptom come from,
Mm-hmm.
etc. But there's a sense of from Viktor Frankl, which is really important, that I wanted to emphasize in this, for any kind of trauma, past trauma, now with the fires, and like he said, everything can be taken from a person but one thing. He wrote this as a survivor of the Holocaust in Auschwitz. He wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning, which is also a question we ask at these moments. Why? Why me? Or why does this have to happen? It's so, I mean, there were children and families, you know, killed,
I'll
burned.
put that a link to that book in the resource guide that we.
Yeah, man searched for meaning. He said, everything can be taken from a person but one thing: the right to choose one's own way in any given set of circumstances. He called it the last of human freedoms. So when you started to realize, have pain, I have anguish, whatever happened to me with my trauma and my accident, I can heal myself. There are things I can do. Excuse me, I have something. I can do something, take charge. I'm not going to get rid of this, but I can be in a process of healing and recovery. That's the
And
same
to
thing in 12 steps.
recognize that
I
you
may I
have to
may
do
be an
that.
alcoholic, but my step one, I'm an alcoholic, and I'm going to recover, and I'm going to move
Yeah.
forward, and I'm going to take it one day at a time, and I'm going to get support. So this is universal of how we face these pains and these traumas. Again, my work is that if we don't, and when we don't, not as a judgment, we've survived it, which is great, but we may still carry the pain and the wounds of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it often shows up in the doctor's office with
Mm-hmm.
a headache, a stomach ache, and a backache, and worse from a chronic disease. And the research is showing that. The research on ACEs, you might provide that, etc. There's also the concept, I talked to you about the immune system, that when we deal with our stress, and we face it, and we learn to let it go, where it may not be weakening our immune system and letting diseases of inflammation or diseases of the immune system and autoimmune type diseases and arthritis and asthma to get worse, or to be initiated by the effect of the trauma and the stress on our immune system. The exciting thing is now, as a meditation teacher, the integration of mindfulness and compassion, trauma does change the brain. So we know it affects the HPA axis, the adrenal glands, a while. And chronic stress can cause, chronic fatigue and affecting the adrenals in certain ways. They get burnt out, as it were. Obviously, we work with that. And the digestion gets affected because we're unable to have the parasympathetic nervous system function optimally. It's like we become dysfunctional.
And the parasympathetic nervous system is the system that calms you down and
exactly
relaxes.
And it's everything is out of whack, and our hormones and the endocrine system. But the exciting thing is the patterns that get created in the brain, also in our nervous system, our neurology. The mind is a healer or the mind is a slayer. It's called neuroplasticity. The brain is plastic. It changes based on what you feed a child. You're beautiful, you're loving, you're capable, you're wonderful. You can be all that you want to be. We love you just the way you are. We appreciate you. How about giving a child that message? Growing up in a home sometimes where the parent is not so nice, has their own issues, has an addiction, there's domestic violence, is abusive, whether it's physical or mental or emotional or sexual. You're no good. You'll never amount to anything. There's something wrong with you. I wish I never had you. Those patterns live in us. They create thought waves and patterns in the brain as well, cognitively, behaviorally affect that, emotionally, and obviously physically. All of this gets together. So you can bounce back through mindfulness practice and neuroplasticity. You change the brain to more of hope and happiness and healing and love, not by denying the quote unquote negative pain, but by bringing to the negative pain wisdom, compassion, love, embracing. That's how, when your child is in pain, you don't go, don't feel that. No, you say, come to mama, come to papa. It's okay. I want you to feel that, but we're going to feel it with love, surround it with love and compassion.
What does that look like on a practical level for someone who has gone through these fires or any other big trauma, the mindfulness piece? Like, what does that actually look like?
And there's a book called Bouncing Back, How to Become Resilient, How to Bounce Back talks about that. There's a lot of books on the mind and mindfulness, a lot of work by Rick Hansen, positive ways of working with the mind and neuroplasticity. Dan Siegel, some people, the Insight Meditation Society and Spirit Rock will have a number of programs. And the essence of mindfulness is precisely how do we face, it's to be happy. I wrote a little book, Happiness Through Meditation, because I'm talking about pain all the time. But the challenge is, how do we be happy by facing our difficulties? And mindfulness gives us the tools to see the truth and to bring a compassionate awareness to it. And so it's first, I would say the first step is awareness. What am I feeling? What's going on for me? What's happening in my mind? What thoughts do I have? What's happening in my body? What feelings do I have? And, self-reflection. And then what's my relationship?
Someone can do with just a trusted friend, or
sure, of course, with a friend, with a priest, with a rabbi, with a neighbor, just talk to somebody who listen. Tell your story.
Getting it out and having it.
Tell your story. Now, obviously,
witnessed by someone else.
I'm training our doctors, naturopaths, to be able to work with people, to have them tell their story. That's the work that I'm doing on how your biography becomes your biology, your cell and yourself, the mind and body, your traumas and your health and disease and your chronic disease. Have the patient tell you their story, write their biography. What happened? Well, when it's fresh now, don't hide it. Don't. Yes, you're in pain, and sometimes you need to sit with your own pain, but still reach out and say to somebody, I don't really want to talk. I just want you to know I'm in pain. Could you just sit with me for a little bit?
I found that
that was has to do anything.
that was one of the most healing things for me as I moved through the PTSD, where I would
Yes,
find either a practitioner or a trusted friend or someone I met along the way
you
who would
got it.
just listen. And
Right.
I was like, I don't know what just happened there, but I felt something, energetically lift off of me. I felt softer. And every time I met someone who created that space for me, I felt like the PTSD
Yes.
started to dissolve a little bit
Yeah.
more and a little bit more. But it was really through the retelling of that story
Yes.
over and over and over again. And also, I learned that one of the
In
symptoms,
a different way, with more
yeah,
hope, in a
right,
context
right,
and a consciousness to release it, to
yeah,
let it go,
yeah,
not to kind of like the
like
wheel spinning,
indulge it,
not to over
yeah,
traumatize
right,
yourself, re-traumatize,
right,
not like the wheel spinning, the tire wheel spinning in the
yeah,
sand and going over and over,
yeah,
but actually crossing a bridge and moving forward and
right.
letting a little bit of the symptoms
That's
go and letting
exactly
the
what it
pain
felt like.
go and letting the trauma go
And
little
it
by little,
happened over time too. It wasn't just like a
slowly over time.
one session event with someone or
It's
or
a
like
process,
it's a process over
right?
a period of time.
And everybody has that process.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's important to recognize, to engage in that process of facing the pain or the trauma, and being willing to be with it. But as you said, it isn't so much what you do, although there's a lot of things to do, and there's a lot
Mhm.
of techniques, and yoga and meditation, relaxation and counseling and therapy and imagery and
And we're going to
neuroplastic
provide resources
plasticity and
in
stuff.
that regard for
Another
people.
story to share with you based on what you said too, and I've learned a lot of this as well with my patients. What heals them? My expertise? Okay. No, you listened to me. You paid attention to me. You cared about me. You
Mhm.
gave me the space to be. You gave me the space to be with my own pain. Because I often say, I'm helping you heal with your relationship with yourself and the parts of you that have been carrying these wounds and pains. Not because they're weak or anything, but because you didn't know you had them and you didn't have the choice or resource to do anything different. So
Mhm.
what you and I are doing now is giving people the choices and the resources, that there's something, and in that there's a hopefulness, there's an optimism, there's an empowerment, there's a sense of, you know, possibility.
Mhm.
Another thing that can happen, we go from hopeless and helpless. There's a sense of non-deserving. It's like, why did I survive? A lot of soldiers go through that when all their buddies got killed. My father was on the beaches of Normandy. Why did I come back
And I think
and have
that's
a life?
important to remember for those people whose houses didn't burn down, but all
Exactly.
their neighbors lost their homes. Or even
Exactly.
like the people in neighboring towns was like, well, it didn't
Yes.
hit my town, like lucky me, but
Why paradise kind of,
yeah,
and feeling guilty
I'm
in
feeling
a
guilty.
way of like, what did I do,
Right.
kind of
And
energy,
can
or
that
I
also,
survived, what did I do, I didn't deserve to survive, or
can
it's
that be another form of trauma for that person?
yes, yes.
Can you say
what
more
what the
about
what the
that?
point is, I don't want to, uh it's universal, but I don't want to generalize.
Yeah.
Everybody's different and unique with what the trauma is, how it
Right.
affected them, how they dealt with it, how they're resilient. Each in their own way has to find what's going to work for them in the support they need. There are some common elements,
Hmm.
whether it's by yourself, with your priest, with a friend, take a class, go to a meditation retreat, take yoga classes, take up a hobby, not as an avoidance, but as a tool to help you face it.
Yeah.
A lot of people
Because there
think,
is no
oh, I'm
like
going to
7
meditate
steps.
and deal with my pain. No, no. The purpose of the meditation is to face it. Is
Yeah.
to face it directly. So a book on that would be John Kabat-Zinn, who popularized MBSR,
Hmm.
mindfulness-based stress reduction,
Hmm.
using the wisdom of your mind and body to face your stress, pain, and illness. So that means your symptoms of post-traumatic stress or your symptoms of stress are actually the wisdom of your mind and body trying to heal itself, trying to grapple with that trauma. But Karen, based on what you shared with your experience, I want to share another experience that I had, which was really profound for me too, based on what you said. Uh, I taught at this place called NICABOM, National Institute for the Clinical Advancement of Behavioral Medicine. It's a training for therapists and doctors in mindfulness and training in trauma work and healing. It's a wonderful resource that professionals and non-professionals can access. So one year, I don't know, it was 10 years ago or more, I was a speaker on their program, and they had a conference. They since have stopped conferences. They're all online now, NICABOM.
Hmm.
Another resource is in California, I think, or no, Colorado, is Sounds True. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of wonderful resources of audio and video and books on healing and trauma. I
And
recommend
really affordable too. They're, yeah.
Tara Brach, Jack Cornfield, Thich Nhat Hanh. Some of them, you know, their whole story is talking about, you know, stress and how to bring mindfulness, compassion, presence, you know, to the moment and
Yeah.
be with it that way. So the story I wanted to share with you, um, and I want us to make sure that we, in all of this discussion, we close with compassion, because that may be the most important
Mm-hmm.
of all that we're talking about, because there's no cure here. And it's not even getting rid of it. It's being with it with a
Mm-hmm.
loving energy, like holding that
Mm-hmm.
baby who's crying, not with an energy, you better stop crying. And I'm doing it because you're in pain. And I want you to know it's okay. And I'm with you. And I give you space like you shared.
Mm-hmm.
So I happened to be there at the time that one of the keynote speakers, unfortunately, I don't remember her name now, but I know who she was and the title of her book. This was very big in the country. She says, I am the Central Park jogger. And this is a story that happened years ago, but was very, very, very prominent, where a young woman was running around the track around Central Park and was molested and beaten and left to dead by a gang of guys. Okay? So she had trauma to the body, trauma to the mind, trauma to the heart, trauma to the soul. And she was like barely alive. So she needed surgeons and she needed psychological support. And, you know, it took a long way back, and it took her time before she could even come out to say, this is who I am, in a way that she's not identified with it, right? Like it's not me anymore. You're not what happened to you. You're what you choose to become.
Mm-hmm.
And so it became a message for her, just like for you. Your trauma is something that happened, but now it's something that you've learned from, that you've healed from, that you can share about, that you can help others with.
Mm-hmm.
Or the trauma that I experienced, you know, growing up, where my dad was suffering from post-traumatic stress and having nightmares and all of that. And, you know, what do I know is going on? So I'm getting anxious all the time, and I'm being a difficult child, and, you know, being told I have this problem and that problem, when
Yeah.
really my problem was I didn't know how to deal with the feelings and emotions that were going on inside of me that nobody was recognizing, because we don't talk about it. So she shared her story of healing from trauma, right? And what she shared, and it reminded me of what you just said. She said, the people who helped me the most, and she had a lot of help,
Mm-hmm.
and she had a lot of courage to face the reality of what happened to her. Okay. She said it were the nurses who would sit and hold her hand and not say a word, except just encourage me. You're getting well. You're going to make it. It's okay. To know that they were around. They created this space. It sounds etheric and it sounds whatever, but there's an environment that one can create for healing. And I want to give you some of the elements that you know, as a handout we can give out. It's on. I took it from a website on about stress, and I added to it some other things. But there's a lovely context of how to be with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not always what do I do about it. There's how to be with it. There's two things I want to share. These are teachings now. I can send you the handouts that you can use.
Mm-hmm.
This is from John Kabat-Zinn, MBSR, his book. And again, I adapted a few things from it. But he has what he calls 7 intentions. And there's actually 9 now that he's added to. But I'll give you the 7. A beginner's mind. Can I see this fresh? What can I learn from this? This is all about when I change how I look at it, and when I change how I be with it, it changes.
Mm-hmm.
Even if what I look at and be with is traumatic, is painful, is difficult, and hurts, how can I be with it? Not what do I do about it? This, again, is the teaching that, as you know, I'm sharing. It's the being and the healing energy, along with what do I do to get rid of it. We're not getting rid of it. We're embracing it in our wholeness. We're touching it with mercy and awareness. A beginner's mind. Non-judgment. Don't judge. Oh, I'm bad. I'm wrong. I'm weak. No judging. This is just the truth of what's happening. And the
And I think,
healing for trauma is the liberating experience of facing painful truth
yeah.
with love, with compassion, with gentleness. Put your toe in the mortar when and if you're ready, with
Yeah.
as much love around you.
I think there's a lot of like judging your own pain against someone else's pain. Like
Exactly.
you've been traumatized, but you're like, oh, that person down the street was traumatized more than I was. Like I
Right.
shouldn't be feeling this way, kind of a thing, you
I
know?
have it better, I have it worse,
Right.
or
And
even
that
or
can get
judging I shouldn't
really,
be here, I shouldn't be there, or this. And the reality is, if you didn't have this, you'd have something, because this is life. This is the universality
yeah,
of it. I tell my patients or my classes, look around the room, see if you want to trade with anybody.
yeah,
Oh, maybe her. Oh, Karen's nice. She looks like she's really good. I think I want to have what she has. Wait a minute. She had this terrible trauma, was in an accident, and suffered for a couple of years and went through hell and back. I don't think I want that. Oh, but that person, she looks nice. I'm joking with you, but you
yeah,
understand what
right.
oh, Dr. Epstein. Oh, he's been tormented his whole life from his
Yeah.
father's trauma. I'm
Take some of that.
exaggerating. You understand what I'm saying? Let's welcome our own stuff.
Yeah.
This is the poem of Rumi, The Guest House.
Oh, one of my favorites.
Every morning a new arrival. So we'll give that as a resource too, right?
Oh, do you have
The
it in
Guest
front of
House.
you? Can you speak? It's
Uh,
not that long.
I don't know that I have it in front of me, but it goes like
It's
this:
so
being human is a guest house.
yeah.
Every morning a new arrival. A pain, a negative thought, a worry comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they're a crowd of sorrows that empty your house of its furniture. Still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight.
Mm-hmm.
In the heart of the pain is the healing. We don't ask for it, we don't want it, but if we get it, can we welcome it and learn from it and relate to it in a healing way with compassion, which we'll end with. I just want to give the 7 intentions. Beginner's mind, non-judgment, patience.
Mm-hmm.
Takes time. You're not going to get over this stuff overnight. It will stay with you a lifetime, but each day, one day at a time, it will heal more and more and more and more. Trust. Trust the process. You will get well. You can heal. You're not alone. Non-striving. Make effort. Go to a meeting. Look support. Do some meditation. Write in your journal. Seek some help, professional or otherwise. But in a non-strive, don't strive. I got to fix this and cure this and get rid of this. Gently relate to it in that way. Acceptance. With grief, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross just sharing resources on the whole big subject that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
The stages of grief. Everybody goes through them. They're not linear at one point or another, right? Shock. Oh my God. Denial. Bargaining. This didn't happen, did it? It's not so bad.
Mm-hmm.
Acceptance. And then there's grieving and moving on and healing. So the grieving is the healing. The facing the pain is the healing. In the heart of the pain. And we have a paradox that we always try to push it away.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's physical or mental, emotionally, we want to heal it and be free from it. But the healing is in embracing it, not getting rid of it. So there's 2 more
Mm-hmm.
besides those 7 that have been added. One is generosity, which is if all you have left is a little, give.
Mm-hmm.
And the last is gratitude. Again, that glass is half full. Be thankful for what you have. Someone just sent me, if I can recall it, a wonderful thing on Thanksgiving, one of my patients. And one of the things we're working on, she's always whining and complaining about everything. And she's always making the glass half empty
Mm-hmm.
instead of half full.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, and she sent me this thing. She found it was so cute. We laughed. Says, if you see your glass half empty all the time, find a smaller glass and pour it in the smaller glass and stop bitching.
Oh my God, I love that.
Okay, pour it in a smaller glass and stop bitching. So when you change how you look at it and you change how you be with it, it changes, and you have the choice how to look at it and be with it. And yes, it will be painful.
Yeah, and that takes time too, just trying to shift your, I mean, I speak from experience here, like it has been such a long process,
Right.
really being able to
Right.
like find gratitude in what happened,
Right.
and being able to look at this from like a point of like, you know, of something that I can use now to
Yeah.
fuel me in some way in the world.
You're helping others.
Right.
You have a sensitivity of trauma. You and I have been talking. You appreciate what I'm trying to offer in my teaching, helping me bring it to the Naturopathic Association in California, recognizing the trauma happening in your state and around the world for that matter, everywhere, whether it's physical illness, mental illness, emotional illness, trauma, addiction, fires, who knows, we're all going through it. You recognize that now your trauma, your pain, your healing from that is what your life is. For me, my father's pain, my pain, soldiers' pain, and epigenetic pain that we're passing on, let's heal it now. So what we pass on to our children and grandchildren is we're free from that because we can do that.
And do you think that's a pivotal thing in the healing process, being able to take what you've gone through and use it for something or
Well,
transform?
I don't think directly, but as one of the intentions of generosity, yes. How can I be of service?
Yeah.
Look what Buffett, Warren Buffett, and Bill Gates, and they have $100 billion. They want to help the world. They want to use their money because what gives life meaning and happiness is not me. It's how can I serve others?
Yeah.
What can I mean?
I found that Viktor Frankl very much emphasized that in his book. Yeah. And that made a big difference for me because I've found that like, if I can't do something good with this horrible thing that happened, then it's
transform
like
it.
a tumor in the middle of my life that doesn't make sense.
You know, just to share with you, Karen, Sounds True had a wonderful, there are all these summits that come occasionally, and what they do is they offer their teachers and their writers, and they interview them. Tammy interviews them and does a wonderful job, and you get a nice taste of their teaching and their process, their books and their tapes that are wonderful that are offered on Sounds True. It's just a wonderful resource. And by the way, just go online on YouTube and Google and just write healing trauma, mindfulness, compassion. Everything I'm saying you can get for free online. So, that's another process.
That's important too. Yeah, people don't have the resources to hire
all free.
A lot of resources that are free or very low cost. Or
friends sitting with you and saying, "I hear you and I care."
Yeah.
I
had like no money after I got hit by the gun, and I figured it out. Like you
don't need money to heal yourself.
No.
And the power of healing is in the presence. In the relationship that you have with yourself, with your friend, with your practitioner, with your priest, with your rabbi, and with your God. And that's the nature of where you seek that support from within yourself, and from without. So these are contexts. So, but in this summit that they had, they were all the top speakers and teachers. A lot of my teachers, people that I've learned from, were there, and I think Jack spoke, and Tara Brock, and Marianne Williamson, and Gabriella, some other people who were prominent, let's say leaders, thought leaders, therapists, teachers in our culture, and who would be writing for Sounds True on psychology and therapy and healing and etc. And this was on psycho-spiritual healing, right? Every single one of them told a different story, but they told the same story. They were all different, but they were all the same. All of them shared their own personal journey of awakening, of healing, of recovery. And it all stemmed from some deep wound and trauma that they lived through in childhood, whether they were abused or their parents this, or they had that, or they had an illness, or they were sexually abused, or some big trauma that they were still working through, or that they had faced and dealt with. That was the fuel through which they became who they are and are now teaching the world healing and meditation and therapy. And it was so instructive because, as you know, one of the ways that I mentor our doctors and other doctors and therapists is when they say, teach me how to do mind body or healing, it's, well, let me help you look inside yourself first, because we're all wounded healers. We're all human. And when
it's all the hero's journey too. It's like
it's the hero's journey. You got it.
Faces. It's everybody has the same story, just different circumstances.
You got it. And where we are in that story, and as wounded healers, when we know that, it's that component, who we are and how we be, is what helps us, regardless of what modality we use or what techniques we learn. And sometimes, obviously, you need both. I have to be skilled at helping the patient with tools and techniques and things to teach them, but it's really how I relate to it and open to it. So let's do two things to kind of close. I don't want to go on too long. We've been going on for a while. What I'd like to do is just run the list on this. I gave the 7 intentions. There's a sheet here. It's called emotional resilience, how to cultivate it. I'd like to just run through that now as a summary from all the topic. We've touched on a lot.
That would be wonderful.
If one of us can find, I'll go online. I didn't have it in front of me because I didn't, it's better not to prepare and just kind of, we're having a discussion. I'm just sharing what's coming to me as it is, but this is my work. So I'm being and doing it all the time. How to help people deal with their pain is really, whether it's traumatic from here or traumatic from that, is how do you face it with as much wisdom and compassion and love and presence that you can bring to bear. Is the poem by Thich Nhat Hanh, Please Call Me by My True Names. And then I'd like to end with a little compassion practice. Okay. So let me review this. And I think it's helpful and instructive. If people are still with us and have gone to here, you might add in the beginning, by the way, towards the end, there'll be a summary of this.
Stay tuned.
No, only because, we've thrown out a lot of stuff here. Right. And there's no one answer. There's no one how to do it.
There's no one place to start either.
There's no one place to start either.
As to where to start.
Well, it starts with yourself. So let me review that. Emotional resilience refers to one's ability to adapt to stressful situations or crises. More resilient people are able to roll with the punches and adapt to adversity without lasting difficulties. Less resilient people can have a harder time with stress and life changes. Your house burning down, your community burning down, living through the terrors and the horrors of what people went through in California, is life changing, and one must adapt to that. And yes, we're going to go back to our life and try to get back to normal, but by recognizing how we were changed and how we were affected, mind, body, spirit, heart, and soul. There's no cure. This is my line. There's no cure for the human condition. There's a healing journey and a spiritual path and the freedom to choose how to relate to life, whatever comes our way. Like Viktor Frankl, how do you choose? That's where I learned that concept of having choices is liberating. You got liberated when you chose to say, I'm going to heal myself from this trauma, without knowing what you were going to do or when it would happen or how to do it. But as soon as you said, I'm going to choose to face it this way, you got liberated. Having a choice is what liberates you. And so that's why awareness is so important, because it's from that point you make a choice. You're an addict? Yes. The healing is when you choose to say, I'm going to go to step 1. There are a lot of steps. There's more recovery. But the journey of healing begins when you shift from that to going to the meeting for the first time and saying, hi, my name is so-and-so, and I'm an alcoholic, and my life has become unmet. It's like facing that. Hi, I just went through a terrible trauma. I don't even know what I'm feeling. I just know that I need to explore what's happening for me. Resilience can be developed with a little effort. If you know the what and how, you can become more resilient in terms of cultivating these qualities. The 7 intentions, the 9 intentions that I shared, you can practice patience and non-judgment and acceptance and see it as, my trauma is healing me, is teaching me. And I can give back. What's the last step in 12 steps, right? Now that I've recovered, I want to bring this to someone else. I want to give them. I want to give, and I'm grateful now that I've been blessed to be free. Yeah, but for the grace of God go I. Amazing grace. Somehow I've been lifted. That's the transformation of consciousness that takes place. Contemplative medicine involves living questions, reflections, exploring your relationship, cultivating resilience in response to life difficulties, and transforming the stress, transforming the trauma, the pain, the illness into a journey of self-healing, awakening, and recovery. So it's like this is the fertilizer for it. It's not just that. And you know that you didn't just transform and heal the trauma from your accident. It
Mhm.
changed your whole being. Your whole consciousness shifted.
Yeah.
And as much as you wish it never happened, it did. And you chose to face it that way. And because you did, the other line from Jack Kornfield's teacher, I've learned from all these people, so I don't have to share. I can't take credit for,
Love
I'm
them.
just applying what I've learned in different places. There's two kinds of suffering. One is suffering that leads to more suffering, and one is suffering that leads to the end of suffering.
Mm.
Healing and recovery from pain and trauma is the suffering that leads to the end of suffering because you face the truth of the pain. But as you do, when my father died and I couldn't stop the pain in my whole being because I hadn't felt anything until he died. I
Mhm.
didn't know what I was carrying in terms of pain and trauma and fear and anxiety and stress and hurt and whatever, shame, grief, the whole nine yards. All of a sudden, this flood, right? And I didn't drown in it. It was opposite. It helped me float. The grief, I couldn't stop crying, but it felt so
Mhm.
healing to finally let it out.
Mhm.
The
Because it's coming
support,
up in order to be healed, in order to
exactly,
release. So your body doesn't have to
ex-
hold on to it anymore,
exactly.
and
The
you don't have to be
body,
a victim to it anymore.
the body bears the burden. The body sheds the tears. The body, uh, the organs sheds the tears. The organs carry the tears the eyes can't shed.
Mm.
There's something like, we're not able to feel that grief, so it goes somewhere and it goes into the organs. Like in
Mhm.
Chinese medicine, the different
Yeah.
organs have different
Yeah.
degrees. So here are the qualities of resilience that you can develop to handle stress better. These are characteristics of resilience. We've talked about all of them, but I just want to mention them in an orderly way. Emotional awareness, you know what you're feeling and why. Keep a journal. Be in touch with what's happening. I'm getting headaches. I feel anxious. I can't sleep. Just be in touch with what's happening and how you're feeling. Be aware emotionally as well with your emotions.
That was hugely impactful for me as well.
Yes.
Writing, like keeping a journal every day. There was a point where I was keeping a pain journal of like what kind of pain I was feeling every day.
Yes.
Yeah, writing was hugely therapeutic.
Persevere. Don't give up. Do not give up. Okay. Whatever you're working at, trust the process. Stay with it. It's going to be difficult, hard. You can't
Yes.
say scrap it. You stay in recovery. You stay in healing. You keep living your life too if you can. But
Mm-hmm.
you recognize that this is something that I have to address. I can't just go back to normal. Part of me goes back to normal, and another part of me acknowledges I'm carrying this, but I'm healing it. I'm engaged in healing at the same time. A sense that the empowerment is, again, that I'm choosing to do this, so I'm in charge of this. I may have symptoms that come that I don't know where they're coming from. I don't know what caused them. I don't know how to stop them. But I'm in charge here. This is my path, my journey. I'm choosing it. So I'm not a victim. Because I'm choosing to listen and I'm choosing to relate to it. And everything becomes, as Rumi called, the guest house. It's my teacher. And I'm learning from it. I'm optimistic. Glass is half full. How do I learn from this? How do I give back? I have social support. I'm strong and I can do this and I'm tough. I need my family. I need my friend. I need my community. I need my teachers. I need professional, whatever support. Do not go through it alone and just share your truth. Go up to somebody and say, I mean, you can talk to a stranger on the subway that has a nice face and go, can I talk to you for a second? Well, I mean, I was around during 2001. It was unbelievable. That was a horrible, horrible, horrible trauma. And I shared with you, I live in Connecticut and I was around for the uh, Sandy School shootings.
Mm-hmm.
Horrible. But there was something beautiful about the connection of people being in it together and sharing their pain and grief with each other. You say to somebody, I just lived through the horrors of, and I just feel like, would you mind listening to me telling you my story for 5 minutes? I mean, it sounds crazy, but, without being, making it a big deal. But what I'm getting at is people will listen, people care, people are nice. So if you can do that with a stranger, if you can have a conversation with a stranger who can tell you their story in 5 minutes, you can do that with your neighbor or your friend, and people will acknowledge that. You know, where were you? What was that like for you, watching houses burn and watching people run and seeing the large number of death from that? And you know, because what ends up happening when these things go out of the vogue, the people who suffered from it tend to go back. You know, they don't stop grieving. They
Yeah.
don't stop feeling the pain.
And
They don't stop wondering how their life has changed
for like
because it's
friends
not
and
on
family
CNN anymore.
members, like it's good to ask the person questions about what they've gone through, like you were just saying.
Yes,
I remember when I was going through my stuff, and it was like years later, and I was like, nobody's ever asks me about, and that's all I wanted was somebody to ask me
exactly.
about my experience so I could just share it with them.
Right. And
Yeah.
you ask other people, you
Yeah.
ask your neighbor, even if you're struggling with it, say, how you guys doing? It's a
Yeah.
week later, 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, you
Yeah.
know, and you don't know that even though their house didn't burn down, they may be feeling more because, oh, I could have helped somebody, but I didn't, or who knows what somebody's going through.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you need to be able to tell your story again, appropriately at the right time.
Mm.
It's not to burden anyone. It's not to spill your guts with anybody. It's just to be honest about what's happening for you. Not so easy. Have a sense of humor. Try,
Yes,
try,
that's important.
try, try to, try to laugh
Conscious
about yourself.
laughter.
Conscious laughter
Literally like
is
going
good
onto YouTube
medicine,
and
and
finding funny. Yeah, it sounds so cheesy
you
and
know. So
cliche.
I will,
Helpful.
you know, try to tell jokes all the time,
Yeah.
etc. Um, have perspective, that you're resilient, that life goes on, you know, don't panic. You will get better. You know what happens, let's say the stock market, right? It crashes every 10 years. The people who panic and sell and act out and do that, you know, they don't do well.
Mhm.
The people who ride it out, who stay the course, who are consistent, who you know, who again, who have perspective,
Mhm.
you know, who kind of see it with beginner's mind and new eyes, some spirituality to try to see it in that larger context of faith and meaning and God and nature, whatever your faith is, whatever you trust in. Take care of yourself. We haven't mentioned that yet. Healthy lifestyle, eat well, take a multiple vitamin if that's something that you feel is going to be helpful. Take a yoga class, relax, get a massage, take a walk, you know, take good care of yourself
Get
so that
enough
the
sleep.
trauma and stress
Yeah.
is not wearing you down.
Yeah.
Cultivate these 7 intentions of meditation and healing, of being with. And in that way, hopefully this trauma can become a source of health and life and healing for you. As you've shared, with the trauma that you shared has become for you, as my work life, my personal life has been from the pain of my dad and what I struggled with in that context, in terms of, again, how did I learn to face that? And I want to help other people and the inner child and everyone who may have been through some difficulty in their life or childhood, and it's showing up in their body, mind, and the only way to heal it is to face it with support and
Mm.
to choose the path to end one's suffering. And the last is compassion. Having said all of that, ultimately it's breathe it in, breathe out compassion. Guest house, welcome it,
Mm.
to see it. Here you are, and that Pema Chodron's wonderful book, When Things Fall Apart, Hard Advice for Difficult Times. No matter what you've been through, the heart, your mind can't figure it out. You're stressed, it's struggle, it hurts. You're right. There's a place in that heart, the bodhicitta, right, the compassionate heart, that is who we are, is our nature, right? We might call it Christ consciousness or Buddha nature, the love of our humanity. In the last resort, is what saves us, is what allows us to know that we can be. So I know that, not because I have the answer and just I'm going to fix you and you won't have pain anymore and you'll heal all your trauma. But I know that everyone has that self in them, that love in them, that compassion in them, their goodness in them, their generosity in them, the capacity for resilience. And if we activate that and we bring that to touch the wound, the pain, the trauma with whatever skills and tools and things we've been talking about. But the heart of it is that compassionate heart. And you said that with somebody just said, please listen to me, pay attention to me, because that's actually the deepest wound, the need to connect, the need to know we're not alone, the need to know it's not just us. So let me guide you in a little compassion. If we can, I'm going to look up for a second while I speak, and we're going to practice both self-compassion and compassion for the other, which is opening the heart and welcoming the difficulty and simply acknowledging it's painful, it's part of being human, and I care. And may we be free from suffering.
Why don't we do this, Dr. Epstein? Why don't we stop this recording? We sign off here and then we start a new one so people can have just that compassionate practice.
Okay.
An individual recording, it might be a little easier so they don't have to fast forward all the way through our
Great.
chat. Yeah.
And as a handout for the ending this recording now, you want to give them the 7 intentions.
Yes.
And add on for themselves. I don't think I have it on the handout I have. Generosity and gratitude. We want to give them emotional resilience as support for the journey, as well as we've mentioned all of those books, so they have that as well in the internet. But I think those 2 will be helpful.
Yeah.
We don't want to overload there. Okay, so let's.
Can I ask you one last question?
Sure.
Do you think people can heal in the same environment in which they were traumatized?
It depends on the context. It depends on the buttons that get pushed. And it depends on what's in the environment. And it depends on how deep the trauma was. And, sometimes returning to the scene of the crime can be effective. So there's no rules of what's helpful or not. When I was first thinking about that environment, well, if you grew up in an alcoholic home and the trauma that you survived was the codependency and the role you played in the family and the issues of everything that happened in the family, and your mother, your father, and your siblings have all recovered, then that would be a good environment for you to heal in and recover in. If you're the only one in recovery and facing the reality of the dysfunction of the family without judgment or blame or victim, but just engaged in seeing the truth, and you're the only one who has sort of woken up and chosen to embark on a healing journey, well, that might not be the best environment. You follow? And the environment is actually living in your mind and heart. So, you have to tread lightly. There's no, I've given a lot of support and resource information, but I don't want to give, this is what you should do, or this is how you should do it, because everyone's different. I just trying to give you some resources and some hope and some empowerment that there is the possibility within you and support elsewhere to approach whatever you're going through, and however it's affecting you on whatever level, it's healable, it's changeable. And those resources are within you, because you've seen the human spirit is unbelievable in what it can overcome when it needs to. And that's what has to be called up from deep inside ourselves when we go through horrible trauma. We're forced to face that part of our humanity. And as much as part of our humanity and aliveness is pain and suffering, as the first noble truth in Buddhism is that there's suffering, there's also love and joy and happiness and generosity and caring and connection and community and compassion. And that's the other side. And that has to get activated in order to work through these traumas. And it's medicine.
Yeah.
It's medicine. It's healing. It has profound therapeutic effects on your mind, on your body, on your heart, on your brain, on your immune system, on your genes. When you bring this quality of presence, of relationship, of reflection, of being to your wound, to your pain, to your trauma, without trying to fix it,
Yeah.
because we're embracing it, we're
Mm.
acknowledging it, because it's a part of us that feels scared and helpless and needs love. That's really at the core.
Yeah.
It's really at the core. So thank you for listening. If you're there or watching, thank you, Karen, for uh, doing this. And I hope this is helpful for people.
I hope
We
so
might post
too.
it there. We might post it on YouTube.
Yeah. Yeah. That actually might
See
be a
what
really good
happens.
idea.
Healing,
Um,
healing, healing, healing trauma. Some ideas and suggestions,
yeah.
something like that.
Thank you so much for your time,
My
Dr.
pleasure.
Epstein. It's always a joy talking with you, and I look forward to more to come and the compassion exercise that we'll do next. So,
Okay.
so
Thank you.